Hi, welcome to this new weekly video. I'm going to be looking each week to summarize briefly one chapter of my Judaism Reclaimed, which relates in some way to the weekly parasha. So this week, Vayakhel, what do we have? It's mostly taken up with a detailed reiteration, summary of the work that went on in the Mishkan to construct the Mishkan. But there's a very unexpected introduction. What do we have? We have the requirement to keep Shabbos, put together Zeh Davar. The sages expound, Rashi brings, there's a connection between the laws of what is prohibited to do on Shabbos and the activities which are carried out in the Mishkan. So as well as there being a legal connection, the laws are learnt out one from the other, what does this connection symbolize? This is something which Rav Shimshon Raphael Hush looked into right from the start, and he says there's a fundamental underlying connection between the two symbolically. Because what do they represent? So the 39 activities for Rav Hush represent humanity's mastery of nature, the ability that God has given us to control, to subdue, to channel the natural world for a better purpose. So on Shabbat, what do we recognize? We recognize that the entire natural world, the entire universe, was created by God in a certain time period, the days of creation, after which there was an absolute cessation of creativity. So we recognize that we ceased from all creative activity, and this is represented by these 39 activities, which represent the entire range of human creativity. And so too in the desert. What were the Jews doing? They'd been working in Egypt, they'd been having to perform all these creative tasks, all this building for the Egyptians, and now they were having to dedicate these same activities, these same creative skills that they had honed for the purpose of God. And the Mishkan represented taking all of humanity's mastery of the physical world and dedicating it to God. Taking it a little bit further, if we notice in the 10 Commandments, there are two sets of commandments. There's one in Parshas Yisro, there's one in Vayakhel. And if we look at the way, the reasons they give for observing Shabbos, they're a little bit different. The first one in Parshas Yisro, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos Lekadsho, recall the Shabbos. Why? Because God's created the world. The second lot of commandments in Vayakhel require us to observe Shamar, to observe the rules of Shabbos, because God took you out of Egypt. Two different reasons. For the Ramban, who fits very well with the Rav Hush idea here, it's not really a contradiction, it's not really a second lot of reasons. The first lot of reasons tell us to recall that God created the world, and that's an abstract truth, so to speak, that has been revealed to us, or we maybe could have worked out. But coming out of Egypt, for the Ramban, is a matter of understanding this idea of God creating the world, not as a truth that we've been told or worked out, but as part of a lived relationship with God. When God took us out of Egypt with the 10 plagues, those 10 plagues show God's mastery of the world. And that's not something which we've been told about or have worked out abstractly. That is something which we have lived as a nation, as part of our relationship with Him. God took us out of Egypt and showed the world, showed Egypt, showed us that He's in control of the world. So, the very same message that we have in the first lot of commandments, recall that observe Shabbos in a way to recall that God created the world, but now in the second lot of commandments, we're told it's from a different dimension, that God took you out of Egypt and showed also that He is in control of the world. It's reiterating the same message. For the Rambam, on the other hand, in Moreh Nevuchim, these two dimensions and the two sets of commandments is not a reiteration. They represent two very different aspects of Shabbos. The first, yes, Zachor es Yom HaShabbos Lekadsho, recall the Shabbos in a positive way, make Shabbos a different sort of day, distinguish it from the other days of the week, because God distinguished the 6 days of creation from the one day of cessation, from the Shabbos, the seventh day. So we mark it out as a different day. But there's also a very different dimension of Shabbos altogether. And that is by observing Shabbos, by not performing creative activities, the Shomru aspect, that marks something else which we say in Kiddush to show that God took us out of Egypt. As slaves, we were not in control of our own time at all. We weren't in control of our own activities at all. We were forced to perform creative activities, to build, to work for the Egyptians. Now on Shabbos, we stop and we recognize that no, we're not slaves anymore. We have control of our own time. We have control of our own activities. And we recognize that our national identity is created in the image of God. That God took us out from being slaves in Egypt to the desert where we built a Mishkan. We took our creative potential that had been out of our control in Egypt, and we were able to channel that as a chosen nation into service of God. Have a great Shabbos.